Hello, everybody. Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Please remember to like and subscribe. Subscribe if you want the mighty Villa to beat the Arsenal this weekend. And if you don't, that means you must want Arsenal to win. I mean, seriously? Let's face it. Arsenal are going up against their Kryptonite. They're going up against the team that basically cost them the title last season. Arsenal last year barely lost a game all season, did they? And they even seem to have worked out how to compete with Manchester City in the Premier League. That is, get your results in before December, pace yourself, and then from about late December on, you just go on a tear and win game after game after game. You become the Terminator. You know, when Carl Reese says to Sarah Connor, they absolutely will not stop ever until you are you know what. And well, the problem is Arsenal, they became the Terminator, but they bumped into their very own version of Kyle Reese, the plucky underdog who appeared and sorted them out. And that was Aston Villa all the way back in April when we went away to the Emirates and against all the odds, having just played 120 minutes against Lille 3 days before. I think it was Lille just a few days before. And then gone to the penalty shootout, had all the drama, all the emotion of it. What do? We go to Arsenal, we go to the Emirates, and we go and beat them on penalties. On penalties? No, we didn't. We go and beat them 2-0. It was amazing. It was, I think Manchester City, the 1-0 win, I think that was probably arguably the greatest performance I've ever seen in my life from an Aston Villa team. But that Arsenal away came very, very close when you consider how good Arsenal were at the time and the fact that Arsenal were going for the title. Of course, last season, that wasn't the only win we had against Arsenal. I mentioned the 1-0 victory over Manchester City. 3 days later, we had a 1-0 win over Arsenal. So that week was also incredible. However, what will Arteta be planning for this weekend? Because obviously, playing up against Aston Villa, he's going to be thinking long and hard about this because Unai Emery did him twice last season. You won't want him to make it 3 games in a row. And let's face it, every point is precious. And in the Premier League, what we've seen in recent years, and we've seen it when Liverpool were going up against Manchester City, is that if teams drop points early in the season, it gets into your head then, like Liverpool did a few years ago. It gets into your head where you think, we've already dropped 6 or 7 points. We simply are not going to keep up with Manchester City. So you have to just keep winning. That's the pressure that Pep Guardiola's City put you under. And Arsenal can't afford to drop points early on up until around October, November, because basically it can, as Liverpool found out, it can get into your head and you can fall away and struggle to regain that momentum. Now, if you look at Arsenal, they have been pushing for the title now for the last 2 years, came very close on both occasions. Now, 2 seasons ago, why did Arsenal not win the title? Well, they were doing brilliantly for so long, but there was always this sense that it was driven a little bit by emotion, right? And there were a couple of occasions where Arsenal won games in the last second. I think back to a game where they played Bournemouth at home. I think they came back from being 2-0, 2-1 behind. And in the last second, Reiss Nelson scored an absolute brilliant goal in like the 97th minute. They all go wild. They're all celebrating. But the thing is, there were a few too many occasions like that. They also beat Manchester United in the last minute, the Emirates 3-2, the late Nketiah winner. Too many occasions like that. So when it got to about April, teams are a bit more tired, harder to keep up the momentum. The pressure's on. They went 2-0 up at Anfield. Liverpool came back to 2-2. They had a couple of occasions where they were leading in games and the opposition team equalised or came back and beat them. And they also had a horror show at home against, I think it was Southampton and Brighton 3-0. Why do I remember these things? Why can I not remember useful things? How do I remember how Arsenal did 2 seasons ago? Why don't I remember things like mortgage advice and things like that? Why couldn't I sit in school and the maths teacher telling me stuff about trigonometry and I bloody remember it? But no, this is what I remember. This is what my brain chooses to find space for. Anyway, obviously that was a wave of emotion, and the lesson I think Arteta learned from that was that Arsenal were going to become a bit more of a defensive unit. I think he looked at it and thought, you cannot beat City by just aiming to score as many goals as you possibly can. There needs to be, a healthy mix of defense in there as well. And instead, he turned his team into the best defense in the Premier League last season, arguably the best in Europe as well. And if you look at it last season, who conceded the fewest goals in the Premier League? Arsenal. 29 goals they conceded compared to Manchester City, who were the next best defence at 34, and Liverpool were the third best defence and they conceded 41. Amazingly, Everton were the fifth best, or fourth best, sorry, at 51. Aston Villa, we were eighth best. We conceded 61. So we conceded double what Arsenal did last season. And if you look at Arsenal's transfer window this year, they've doubled down. Their big signing so far this summer has been from Bologna, Riccardo Calafiori. Now, that's a player I'm going to talk about a little bit more in a second. But Calafiori comes in as a left centre-back or a left-back. Very versatile. He's big, he's tall, 6'2". He can charge forward. He can play as a kind of, a central defender coming up into midfield, which is what Pep Guardiola likes to do with John Stones. Or he can play as that inverted fullback, which Liverpool likes to do with Trent, Alexander-Arnold, and Arsenal did last season with Zinchenko. So that's what they can get from Calafiori. He offers a multitude of options. And if either Saliba or Gabriel are out, two of the strongest defenders in world football, well, actually, they've now got a really good replacement to just come in and sit there and probably not lose too much by way of height, at least, and defensive ability. But I'll talk a little bit more about Calafiori in a second. But if also Arsenal have been linked with Mikel Arteta, who we remember from the Euros, winning it with Spain. He scored that late header against Germany in the quarterfinals to get them through. And he's from Real Sociedad. And it's hard to predict what Arteta's planning sometimes with players. You'd have thought Declan Rice was coming in as a CDM last season for Arsenal. And that wasn't really what he did. He was a bit more box to box. So Moreno, who knows, maybe he wouldn't come in and be a CDM, but I have a feeling he would be. And his duels statistics are very, very good. And not only that, he's very good in sort of winning aerial duels. He's good at winning duels on the ground, but he's also technically really, really gifted. I think he'd be a real, real strong addition to Arsenal in centre mid. And the thing is, Arsenal have strengthened in defence. So they've doubled down on that tactic. And it feels a bit like Arteta's gone, we conceded 29 goals in the Premier League last season, which is an amazing record. I think we can concede even fewer than that. And I wonder if he's looking at it and thinking, we are just going to win this by being the best defence going, physically overawing teams. But I'm going to go to the tactical pad. Look at me. I am so, up to speed with things, really in tune, in fashion. My favourite music is like what? Have you heard a thing called Britpop? Blur, Oasis, Pulp? They're new and cool, aren't they? Anyway, no. Here I am. So, if we look at the Arsenal, defensively, I think they've got stronger. If the San Marino, they're going to get even stronger. But in the forward lines, they've sold Emil Smith-Rowe. It looks like they're about to sell Nketiah to Nottingham Forest. They haven't really added anything up top. And I can't help but think Arsenal still need an extra ingredient in that front line just against the absolute best teams going. Now, who am I to question Mikel Arteta? I mean, the man's done a really incredible job at Arsenal so far. And I think, I've predicted they're going to win the Premier League. And I even think they could be outside bets for Champions. Well, not even outside bets. I think they could be a really good bet for the Champions League as well, just because teams that win the Champions League, sometimes they can just sort of be stout, solid defenses you get through. And I think they have a team built to do it. But it always kind of felt with Arsenal. And I do watch them a lot, in fairness. I live in a very Arsenal area, so I know I have a lot of Arsenal fan friends and talk about them quite a bit. it just feels like they need an upgrade on Nketiah, and maybe that's what they get before the transfer window ends. There's that lad at Atletico Madrid that Chelsea didn't sign in the end and went with Joao Felix. A player like that who could just be a bit more of a physical presence and maybe offer something slightly different, come on and get the odd goal, add a bit of rough and tumble. Because Kai Havertz is a player of movement, he's a player of ghosting into positions, and there were a lot of question marks about Kai Havertz last season about how good actually is he. Chelsea, it always felt a little bit like, does he flatter to deceive? I know he scored the winner in a Champions League final. Is he one of these players who gets a bit hyped up? I still think there's games where I watch him and think, like for Germany, for instance, at the Euros, I thought there's just still something there that just feels a bit missing. But by the same token, he really was excellent for Arsenal in the second half of last season in particular and became a stalwart forward for them. Scored loads of goals, scored last week against Wolves in their first game of the season. So, you can't doubt that, but it just feels like with Arsenal, they're still light up top. Let's say Havertz gets an injury. Obviously, they've got Gabriel Jesus can come in. But again, I still think whilst Jesus is very good, just someone who can score a few more goals, a bit more physicality up there, just something slightly different is what I just think they're lacking in a way that I don't think Man City are, or they weren't, City weren't. I mean, when they had Erling Haaland and Julian Alvarez. Alvarez is gone now, so yeah, interesting with Haaland. He'll obviously start every bloody game, but if he's not around, who goes in there? Interesting to see what Guardiola has planned. But anyway, I'm talking a lot about Arsenal here, obviously, aren't I? So this obviously I'm going to talk about Villa. But so this is the lineup. For those on YouTube, you can clearly see what I've got up here. For those listening on Spotify, Apple, all those places, please give us 5-star reviews on your phone app. Oh my goodness, it helps so much. You cannot believe how much this stuff helps. If you like what we do, helps us grow, helps us keep doing this on your iTunes as well. On Apple, you can do it on there as well on your phone and online, wherever. Sorry, I had to get that in. But anyway, so if you're listening, I'm going to make this as listenable as possible as well. Like you don't need to watch it on YouTube, although if you want to go on there and do it, then great. But so I've got the two lineups here, and basically it's just a repeat for Arsenal, it's a repeat of the lineup they had against Wolves last week when they won 2-0. So in the forward lines, I don't think there's a lot that could really change anyway, or would want to change. I mean, maybe they bring in a Jesus Martinelli. Maybe they bring in Leandro Trossard for a Martinelli. Thomas Partey. Maybe they bring in Jorginho. Those are the options they have. But the defence is where I'm most intrigued by them. But before I get onto Arsenal, I do just want to mention Aston Villa because probably a few people here are seeing that it's the exact same lineup as we had against West Ham, except Diego Carlos is at centre-back. And Ezri Konsa has gone to right back. And the only reason I've done that is because of questions about Matty Cash's fitness. Kosta Nedeljkovic, I love him. I think he's got all the raw ingredients to be a real top player, and I can't wait to see him progress at Aston Villa. He looked a little nervous when he came on against West Ham in a debut in a whole new country, new culture, new league. You're 2-1 up away. You want to hold on to the lead. With a team that likes to keep possession, you've got Mohamed Kudus, one of the best attacking players in world football, going at you. Of course, you're going to be nervous as an 18-year-old. And, fair play to him. He still stood up to it. And in a way, an experience like that, will be good for him in the long haul. But I just wonder, is it a bit too early to throw him in there as a direct replacement for Matty Cash against Arsenal? Who knows? Maybe Unai Emery goes, well, you're here. Go do it. Go show what you can do. And there's an opportunity for him to show exactly why, Villa went and signed him. And as I say, I really think Nedeljkovic, if he stays at Villa rather than goes on loan, I think he'll play a lot this season. And I think he'll go from strength to strength. And I think he's just a couple of games away from being comfortable. And then if he has one really good game, all good. But for the experience level, I could see Diego Carlos coming into centre-back and Ezri Konsa going out right. Now, this is where I just have a few questions about Aston Villa at the moment. I still think defensively we haven't done enough in the transfer window to improve it. We conceded 61 goals last season. Um, I think Onana's going to help in that respect. I think Onana's presence there will help us from set pieces, which is where Villa looked at their most vulnerable last season. Seeing Onana there last week against a very tall, physical West Ham team when we were defending, just seeing his presence there was like, oh, I suddenly feel a little bit more comfortable about things. And I bet his presence in defence from those set pieces leads to Villa conceding fewer goals and looking hopefully a little less chaotic defending those set pieces. But I just can't help but think, Diego Carlos last season, he had two excellent games when we played Man City and Arsenal last season. He had a number of really good displays when he came in, but there's just question marks about him. I think if Fulham had bid what was something that was worth it, Villa would have let him go. And all the links to Hertroida makes a lot of sense. He comes in there and he's an immediate upgrade at right back. He's experienced. He can play at centre back. That versatile kind of defender is really what's screaming out to us at Villa. It's really. I said this in squad analysis the other day. Let me know what you think. Do you think I'm over egging it a bit? But it's just something where I think we've already got Cash with a potential injury. Maybe, who knows? Maybe he won't be. Maybe he'll turn up on Saturday and it's all good. Maybe it's just a hamstring tweak. But if he's out, we're already having to shift it around. And, God forbid Pau Torres or Ezri Konsa get injured, because then we're suddenly super, super light again. And, Villa are restricted with what we can do with PSR. There really aren't many options for us. Who knows? Maybe Emery plans that Tyrone Mings is going to come back. Maybe he plans that Boubacar Kamara comes back in. And Kamara did play in a back three, has played in defence before for Marseille. Maybe even Onana himself is converted into a defender if Villa are that light. But it just feels like another defender, Hertroida, for instance, or a Sepp van den Berg, someone like that, just makes me feel a lot more comfortable. Because everywhere else, I'm feeling pretty good about Villa. It's just that area, and it's that right centre back, right back area. And believe it or not, it's the place where we've already got a potential injury. So anyway, look, Konsa's played at right back before. Carlos has played at centre back many a time. We beat Arsenal with this back four last season. We can do it again. I'm not doing down Villa at all. I'm just pointing out, I think this, hopefully with the transfer window still with, about 8 days to go as of recording, we might improve it a wee bit more or just add depth. Anyway, so if Konsa does play a right back, goes up against, let's just say, Martinelli, and Carlos comes into the centre. Now, if we think of when we beat Arsenal last season, we were their kryptonite, right? So basically, Mikel Arteta was collapsed on the floor like Superman when he's got the kryptonite near him. Lex Luthor, our Unai Emery, giggling away, laughing at it. Lewis Lane, played by Terry Hatcher from the 90s Superman show, screaming about what's going on. And Arteta's there saying, these bloody villains. And you're right, we damn near are villains. It's what we are. It's our name. Well, if you think back to it, when we beat Arsenal 1-0 last season, it came on the back of 3 games in 5 days. So on the Sunday, we played Bournemouth away, who were in red-hot form. Easy to forget that. Bournemouth were in red-hot form when we played them last season in December. We went away and equalised in the last minute after a fantastic whip ball from Moussa Diaby into an incredible neck-stretching header from Ollie Watkins. Late equaliser 2-2. And in that game, we were robbed by a horrible offside call from VAR. They were dragged on for ages. Semi-automatic can't come in soon enough. Got that 2-2. Then we went and played Man City at home on the Wednesday night, put in the most incredible performance of all time. Probably since the 7-2 when we beat Liverpool, but I'm looking all the way back to the 5-1 against Liverpool in the 1977 when Super John Dean got 2 goals, didn't he? I think Andy Gray scored as well. Oh, what a result that was, 5-1. at Villa Park. Shame it wasn't on TV. But everyone who was there remembers it. So look, we look at Arsenal. So we beat Man City in an extremely physically demanding game where we was at it for 90 minutes. And we took all that momentum from the Bournemouth result, from the Man City result, 3 days later into the Saturday evening game against Arsenal. And in the first 10 minutes, we scored the goal that I think sums up Unai Emery's time in charge at Aston Villa. And I think for me was the moment of last season. Because annoyingly, the Sky highlights only show the goal from halfway through the build-up. You have to watch the whole thing. And it goes from start to finish. It's almost like the entire team had practiced it in training. And one of the first bits I remember is when Pau Torres gets the ball and Ollie Watkins comes deep with the centre-back on him. And Pau Torres knocks the ball over into him. Watkins holds it up, lays it across into the midfield, works across the midfield into Tielemans. Tielemans, who no-look pass, can bloody psychic with Leon Bailey. Bailey overlaps him to the byline, pulls it back. John McGinn back to goal, booty to goal with his big old booty, turns around, whips it into the top corner there now. Old, as we affectionately know him, Braveheart himself, scoring what I think was goal of the season for Aston Villa, and what I think was maybe the best goal in the Premier League last season. Forget your volleys, forget all that stuff. Team goals like that are amazing, and it wasn't just that Villa did it. Pulled it off, but it was the fact they did it against the best pressing team in the Premier League. They did it against the best defensive unit in the entire Premier League. And it came just over a year after Unai Emery had come into Aston Villa. And I think, to me, it was the culmination, I'm forgetting all my words this morning, culmination of a year of training, a year of Unai Emery's coaching, and it all led up to that magical, magical goal. And that's what we are overjoyed to see at Aston Villa. And I think we can do it again against Arsenal this weekend. But what happened after that first 10 minutes is that Villa got quite tired, which was understandable, having just played 2 super demanding games against Bournemouth and Manchester City. To then have to play against the best pressing team in the Premier League, who just are relentless, was exhausting. And in truth, Arteta would look back on that game and think Arsenal probably should have scored 2 goals at least. They had Odegaard had 2 big chances. Kai Havertz had that goal disallowed in the last minute, very light touch off his hand. So, Arsenal were essentially were ascendant throughout that game, and Villa really struggled to retain the ball. I think it's testament to our defensive display that we were able to keep them out. Amazing display. But at the same time, Arsenal would look at that and think, if we can repeat that against Villa and work the same opportunities, they'll go and, get a goal this time out. However, that would involve Zinchenko at left back coming inside and being the kind of, inverted fullback who overloads in the middle. It permits the midfielder then to push forward and overload our defence and all that. And it worked for them when they beat us 4-2. The inverted fullback of Zinchenko really caused us multiple headaches. Do you remember the 4-2 when the own goal from Emi Martinez very early in Unai Emery's reign? And it worked for them last season at Villa Park, except they just didn't score. And Zinchenko started for Arsenal against Wolves last week, which is why I've included him in Arsenal's defence. But if you think back to when we beat them 2-0 away, now obviously away games are very different kettle of fish. There's not much of an onus on you to be the ascendant team. It's more on Arsenal themselves to take it to you, just as it's on us to really kind of take it to Arsenal at Villa Park. But in that first half against Arsenal, they were really good. And again, Leandro Trossard should have scored, but Emi Martinez, best goalkeeper in the world, just as he did when we beat Arsenal 1-0 at home, He did the same thing away, pulled off an absolute worldie of a save from Trossard. It was an incredible stop. Um, and, Arsenal causes a multitude of problems down their right-hand side. More on that in a sec. But I'm just going to focus on their defence at the moment because I've put Zinchenko in there as their left back because, he played against Wolves. So why wouldn't he play against Villa? They've shown that inverted fullbacks can cause problems against every team in the Premier League. So why wouldn't it be able to cause a problem against Villa? Well, the thing that intrigues me is a man I mentioned earlier, Riccardo Calafiori. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that I think Calafiori could be, by the end of this season, signing of the summer. Big shout. Big shout. But if you look at it, as I said, if they sign Moreno from or Marino from Real Sociedad, put him into centre mid, I think Arsenal's defence is just is better than anyone else's in world football. I genuinely believe that. They have every single ingredient there suddenly to be really, really hard to beat and concede even fewer than 29 goals in the Premier League next season. And Calafiori, he's coming from Bologna. He's 22 years of age, so he's a brilliant age. Versatile. He can go into centre back. He can play in a back three, as he did last season with Bologna. But he scored a fair few goals for Bologna. He got a fair few assists for Bologna as well last season. And the thing with him is that he can also, as a left back, invert. And the thing is, if he inverts and comes into the centre, Zinchenko is a player who's much more of a technical, low centre of gravity. Calafiori is different in that he'd come in and he'd be much more of a big physical unit. And suddenly you look around that centre mid area and you've got, let's say, a Thomas Partey. I'm not saying Partey would start. It could be a Jorginho. It could be a Moreno if he comes in. You got Declan Rice, Calafiori, Odegaard. Suddenly that is it's a big, strong, dominant central area. And Calafiori showed what he can do going forward for Italy in the Euros, if you remember when they beat Croatia in the last minute with a 2-1 winner. Calafiori heroically running forward with his hair flopping around. He was like a bloody Roman marble statue of an ancient hero who burst out the seams, come to life, was throwing aside ancient Gaulish soldiers and kicking aside ancient Britons and charging forward to Hadrian's Wall. And he puts an assist across to the Italian fullback. I can't remember who it was now, who scored a fantastic finish. But that all came from Calafiori making a pass, doing a 1-2, beating men in midfield, breaking lines just with his physicality, his big awkwardness, and his technical ability. And Calafiori can do that from both a left back position where he can invert. He can do it from centre back if Arsenal play with a back three, or if, let's say, Calafiori plays in the centre and Zinchenko plays on the left, and they want to have, instead of an inverted fullback, they have the centre back come into midfield like John Stones does for Arsenal, and Calafiori can come up here and overload in the middle and support from there. Calafiori, to me, just feels like he offers an incredible number of options for Arsenal. And that where if you've got a Zinchenko and let's say you're someone like I don't know, Brentford or a Bournemouth, and you've got tall players and you want to send balls into the back post against Arsenal and you think you can beat Zinchenko for headers and knock a ball down, you've got Calafiori there at left centre back or left back, sorry. Hard to beat him. Really hard. Ben White is also really tall as well. So that defense is tall, it's solid, it's big, strong, and it's got a lot of technical ability where Ben White can burst forward down the right and support, and Calafiori can come inside or he can go down the left. Because, look at Calafiori's stats as well here on FB Ref, right? And we go to his crosses, I've noticed here. Look at the crosses stats. Look at the passes into the penalty area stats. Better than 82% of other defenders for or centre backs for passes into the penalty area. Better than 87% of other um, fullbacks, centre backs for crosses. And if you look at his pass types, he loves a switch of play, better than 82%. He loves a through ball. And then if you just go up to his defensive stats, tackles, better than 75%. Interceptions, better than 96% of other centre backs. And the thing with interceptions is that it, strongly suggests intelligence. It suggests a player who reads the game really well. But it's not just that you have intelligence and can read the game, but it also means that you can, bloody have the physicality and athleticism to get to the ball before the opposition has a chance to get to it. So I'm sorry here on the Villa podcast that I'm talking up an Arsenal signing as much as this. There's probably a lot of people like this going like, would you shut up and talk about Villa? I'm sorry. But we've got to focus on the opposition as well here because we're playing Arsenal. And I'm putting my eggs in the basket here saying, I think Calafiori is a brilliant signing. Or I think he's going to turn out to be a brilliant signing. Because as well, if Aston Villa or if Arsenal want to play, let's say, wing backs this season, they can put Bukayo Saka out on the right, and they can go to a back three of Saliba, Gabriel, and Calafiori, and they can have Martinelli. They could take out Martinelli and put Jurriën Timber. Because not only that, they have Jurriën Timber as well, who was a superb player at Ajax in season 4, particularly in an attacking sense. Plays at centre-back, plays at left-back. Reminds me a lot of Hertroida, who we've been linked with, partly why I'm so keen to get Hertroida. I was at the game last season where Timber played 45 minutes for Arsenal on his debut, first game of last season, where they beat Nottingham Forest 2-1. He looked great, 45 minutes, and then he did his ACL and was out for the season. Tragic. I hate to see players getting injuries like that. But I feel like Timber is a bit more of a light for Zinchenko rather than a Calafiori. Calafiori brings to Arsenal this sort of attacking prowess that I think Zinchenko has, but he adds more defensive solidity than Zinchenko has, I think. That's just, so I'm wondering, will Calafiori play against Aston Villa and therefore go up against Leon Bailey? Because I just wonder if Arteta's thinking long and hard about what Villa did to them last season. And he might look at it and he might go, well, we should have scored at Villa away last season, so actually I don't need to change it up. We just do the same thing again and we'll score. But the thing is, Villa still beat them twice and didn't concede a goal and scored 3. So does Calafiori come in against one of the best attacking players in world football? Now, he didn't get on the pitch against Wolves last week for Arsenal. Jurriën Timber did. So I'm not saying Calafiori is going to immediately come into the team, but I have a feeling when he does eventually get in there that he's going to bloody well be staying there. So yes, Calafiori and Zinchenko is the area I'm most fascinated by. And if it's Leon Bailey versus Zinchenko, with Rodgers close by as the second striker, I really think those two can cause havoc for Zinchenko, particularly if Zinchenko's going forward. They get caught, ball over the top to Leon Bailey. There's a bit of space to operate within. There's a lot of options there then suddenly, aren't there, to get it into the box. I just fancy Leon Bailey against Zinchenko. I really do. The problem is that if Matty Cash is injured, I mean, Konsa will go forward. He will support. He'll kind of have to. But there's not really much coming forward, is there? It's that he's not going to offer as much going forward as, let's say a Hertroida who joined us. He just wouldn't. Konsa is at his best as a centre-back. He's more of a defensive player. So we are missing something, I think, with a bomb right back. But now, when you look at Arsenal, most of their attacks come down the right-hand side, okay? It tends to be Ben White bombing on down the right, supporting Bukayo Saka. And what he can do is he comes for the overlap. Saka comes inside. Ben White goes beyond Luka Dean. And what happens is I call it Odegaard Island. And we saw this repeatedly when they beat us 4-2 a year and a half ago. But we saw this repeatedly when we played Arsenal at the Emirates in April, where Saka and Odegaard had a field day in the first half. We did brilliantly to keep them quiet in the end. But I call it Odegaard Island because the thing is, when Ben White gets forward, it occupies the Villa fullback. Saka cuts inside, it takes the centre back or a CDM. And Odegaard tends to find space here. And it's this kind of area where he's sort of just, the heavens parted, the sea parted, the Red Sea parted, and Odegaard is in his own little island where he can get the ball and he can send a ball through to Ben White if he gets in behind, or he can pass it into Saka, or he can send a cross into a Havertz, and that's how they scored last week against Wolves. Havertz ghosting in front of, say, a Diego Carlos. It's Odegaard Island down that right-hand side with Ben White bombing on overlapping that really causes teams so many problems. And I saw it live last season. I watched Odegaard live in person, and I actually think he's one of the best players I've ever seen live. I think he's an amazing football player. Technically, everything he does, he's great. But not only that, Ben White can come forward, but Bukayo Saka can go in there, and Odegaard can come out to the right-hand side, and Ben White can come in and support, and there can be little triangles there, and Saka can go in, and I just call it Odegaard Island. It's just where he causes havoc. It's when Saka and Ben White move and he finds the space. And that's where a player like maybe a Tielemans, if he plays as the centre midfielder, he played in that exact role against Arsenal in the 2-0 win away alongside John McGinn. Will McGinn go back there maybe as a bit more of a defensive player than Tielemans? I don't think Unai's going to change. I'd be surprised if he changes up what we saw against West Ham with Tielemans and Onana together. But somebody's going to have to be very aware of what Odegaard's doing. And you have to face it. At some point, you have to think that Odegaard and Saka are going to create something. And obviously, Saka, we all know what he can do. He can get down the line, and then he can, whip the ball, pull the ball back, or he can cut inside and hit one with his left foot. He will try and do that at some point in the game. We all know it's done that. It's just Arsenal's left-hand side. What tends to happen is they have that player invert from the left back, and Martinelli sort of operates on his own. Declan Rice goes box to box. But if Calafiori plays, I wonder, when I mentioned his crosses earlier, Calafiori maybe comes down the left-hand side and whips a few balls in, and maybe Arsenal's attack this season isn't so predominantly down the right, and actually there's a little bit more balance in what they do down the left. We'll see anyway. I mean, look, anyway, when we look at Aston Villa last season, so the 1-0 win at home, we rode the wave of momentum in the first 10 minutes, scored an absolutely brilliant Unai Emery goal, and we can absolutely do that again against Arsenal this weekend. Arsenal pressed super hard. They're the best pressing team in the Premier League. And we found it very difficult to play out. But Unai Emery learned from that. And what he did at Arsenal away, in that first half, we kind of had to be a bit backs to the wall, just a bit defensive and just wait for a breakaway. And we hit the post in the first half. If you remember, Ollie Watkins got that, took opportunity. I think there was a mistake in the Arsenal defence. Saliba hitting the ball against Zinchenko's back. Ollie Watkins gets forwards, hits the post. But by and large, Arsenal were the more dominant team, and Odegaard and Saka caused us a lot of problems on Odegaard Island. But what Villa did in the second half, we dominated. What we did was Zaniolo was very, very effective. And we got around Arsenal's intense press by having in Zaniolo a tall, strong, physical player who can hold the ball up with his back to goal. Now, John McGinn loves to put his booty in there. He shakes it around. He's twerking on the football pitch, banging players left and right. But is he that tall player who Emi Martinez can hit a ball into to hold it up with his back to goal? He's not really that sort of a player. So I think McGinn's going to start, but I wonder what it means. Do we do something different? Do we put Morgan Rogers back there to be that player, to have his back to goal, hold it up, win aerial duels, those kinds of things on that left hand side? Do we have Jacob Ramsey do it? Because obviously Zaniolo's not there anymore. Uh, I think it'll be interesting to know because I think we're going to be more direct than usual against Arsenal just because of their press and try and repeat what we did away in the second half. Um, and that will be surefire one way to just get around the press and create opportunities. Obviously, I've mentioned earlier, I think Leon Bailey on Zinchenko, that's an area where Villa can have a lot of joy. I think Philogene can have joy there as well. But the best thing about Villa is the fact we have so many options as well. So let's say in that first half we go a bit defensively stout, a bit more just play it safe, don't take too many risks, just hold out against Arsenal, particularly on the right side. And so we just put Luca Dean in there. But then if we want to change it up like we did against West Ham, we've got Ian Matson. And the good thing is, if Ian Matson goes forward, you've got a back three then of Torres, Carlos, and Konsa. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Matson comes forward, supports, and you could take a John McGinn out, and then obviously do what we did last week, where you bring in Jacob Ramsey, put him there, and suddenly, if Arsenal are trying to get forward and work an opportunity, if they haven't scored early on and they're still going, if Aston Villa can just find a moment where they switch off and Matson finds that gap as he did against West Ham between kind of the fullback, the opposition winger and fullback, just finds 5 yards of space, he becomes a really effective weapon because he can lay it off to a Jacob Ramsey who finds that space in behind a Ben White, or he can go. Matson can go at Ben White and take him on 1-for-1 and try and work an opportunity by getting to the byline and working with Jacob Ramsey. I really think Ian Matson, in an attacking sense this season, is going to be a great signing for Aston Villa, and we already saw a hint of it last week against West Ham with that brilliant goal. And of course, Ollie Watkins, he was the only player who looked a bit off it last week. He looked like he was still on Mykonos a little bit, which is understandable because he played a million games last season. He played at the Euros right to the final. So he's earned the right. He needs a break. And, if he still, Ollie Watkins loves playing Arsenal. He always scores against them. They never seem comfortable playing against him. And I'm sure it'll cause them a lot more problems again this weekend. But we also have that option, don't we, of John Durant come in here, be a bit more of a physically imposing player. His all-round game was good against West Ham. It looked like he'd improved that, even though he hasn't really been around much this summer because he was away in the Copa America. But he looked like there was some really good signs there from Duran. And if he sticks around, two of my outside bets this season, John Duran scores between 10 and 15 goals. I said this before the Premier League started. John Duran scores between 10 and 15 Premier League goals, and Ange Postecoglou leaves Tottenham before the end of the season. Those are my two outside bets. Feeling a little bit smug about it, actually, after last week, thinking, a few hints there might be correct. Should have put a bet on that. But, don't listen to me on betting because I'll be definitely wrong. But anyway, so Villa have those options to go a bit more physical. I talked about Arsenal's physicality. Villa have that physicality. And, Matson coming up into the right area, finding the gaps between the full-back and the winger. Ramsey charging forward, Rogers charging forward. You've got Onana pressing forward. You've got Leon Bailey charging there. You've got John Duran or Wally Watkins. I call it the stampede. It's like a stampede. It's like what took out Mufasa in The Lion King. Bloody Scar's looking down from the top of the Trinity Road stand thinking, I'm going to throw Mufasa down in front of that because he's going to get trampled and he's going to become king of wherever it was, Pride Rock. Is that where it was? Good. Look at them, like the pace, the physicality of them, the skill, the intelligence of them. Clearly last week, that goal they worked together between Matson, Ramsey and Duran was off the training ground. Absolutely amazing goal. And that is going to be something we repeat a lot, or attempt to repeat a lot this season. I think Maatsen, second half, particularly if Arsenal haven't scored and they're still going for it, that's where we could cause a hell of a lot of problems for them. Um, and, but if Arsenal do get an early goal, it's not the end of the world. It makes it more difficult, I think, because I just think they'll go into quite a defensive shape as they did, say, at Man City away last season, where they drew 0-0, and probably the only team in the league who gave Man City absolutely nothing at the Etihad. I mean, obviously Villa gave them nothing at Villa Park, but at the Etihad itself, there's no one else did that other than Arsenal. And I wonder if they do get that early goal, I think, right, shut up shop against Villa away. This is a great 3 points. And the onus is on Villa then to just go and get a goal against the best defence in the league. And I would argue the best defence in Europe. But as I say, we have a lot of different ingredients. And look, don't forget about the man himself, Emi Buendia. Buendia can come in there and offer something a little bit different as well. He can come in and, we talked about it in the transfer squad analysis the other day. Aston Villa, they tried to get Joao Felix. So it's quite clear Aston Villa wanted a different option at second striker. We have a lot of tall players who have a tall profile. They're quite direct. I think Morgan Rogers is more than a transitional player, though. I think Morgan Rogers is more than just a transitional player. I think Morgan Rogers is going to end up being an out-and-out striker. I think he's going to be. He has all the raw ingredients to potentially one day be a great striker. He's now progressed from left midfield into the second striker role. And I think he has the skill and the link-up play to be a real creative presence in there, more than just a transitional direct player. But he is a different profile to Joao Felix, and he's a different profile to Emi Buendia. And I just can't help but think that Villa wanted someone in there like a Felix who they thought was kind of low centre of gravity, can retain the ball in really tight spaces. And as Sam Tai, given the royalties, calls it, a lot picker. The great Sam Tai, go follow him online on Threads and Twitter as well. Fantastic journalist. You see him everywhere, Sky Sports, ESPN, all those types of places. So, as he calls it, the lot picker player who can get double figures assists, double figures goals as well. That's what I think Villa were looking for in Joao Felix. Somebody who can just offer something a bit different to Morgan Rogers, even though I think Rogers can do that as well. But at the moment, it doesn't look like that player's coming in. Who knows? There might be a David Ornstein tweet out of nowhere in the next few days. Kind of hoping it's more in defence, though, if that is to happen. But if Villa aren't to get a new signing into that second striker role, this is a chance of Buendia to show, everybody else has levelled up under Unai Emery. Having seen Buendia in pre-season last year before he got that awful knee injury, I think he was about to power up in the same way Leon Bailey did, or I think he had the opportunity to do it. It's such a shame we didn't get to see him last season. Who knows? He showed signs against Athletic Club in the pre-season friendly that he can find through balls. He's still got that about him. Who knows if he comes into Villa this season and just levels up and becomes a real creative fulcrum in that space in behind the striker. Who knows? I just thought I'd say that's another option Villa have. Villa have a lot of options. So yes, I think Villa are going to start defensively stout. I think it's probably going to be the same back line as last week. But if Cash is injured, well then Konsa goes to right back. Diego Carlos comes back into the centre, and Onana, Tielemans in centre midfield. It'll be tough for them. West Ham didn't really press us very hard last week. I think they were caught in two minds about what exactly to do with Villa. Arsenal will press. So it's going to be a different challenge now for Tielemans and Onana. But, with Onana, we have that physical profile in centre midfield to stand up to that press. And he has the technical ability as well to find the pass out. Tielemans as well has the technical ability to get around it. But the thing I suspect is that Villa, whilst we play it out from the back, what we will look to do is get past Arsenal's press by Pau Torres getting the ball, knocking it long into an Ollie Watkins coming deep to chest it, win it, lay it off. Or do what we did, with direct kicks from Emi Martinez or a Diego Carlos over the press into a Watkins, into a Duran, or into the left midfield zone that worked so well with Zaniolo last season, or potentially could work with Jacob Ramsey or a John McGinn or a Morgan Rogers, whoever it is who plays in that left midfield role. Anyway, I've rabbited on long enough. I really look forward to this game against Arsenal. I think they're two fantastic football teams, Villa and Arsenal. Um, and I think it really is emblematic of how good Aston Villa have become uh, under Unai Emery, that Arsenal could look at this game this weekend and think this is one of the most important games they have this season if they are indeed to get pushed for the title. And Aston Villa ourselves, we have to look at it and think we're a top four team. We can beat anyone. We proved it last season. We did it last season. We did it away at West Ham last week. Why can't we dare to dream of what's possible this season? Why can't we dare to dream we push for titles? I know it sounds ridiculous. Arsenal fans might be laughing at that. I don't care. You're here to win things. Think about it in that way. You're not here to say I'm happy to come fourth, even though it's a brilliant achievement. You say I want to win everything. And yeah, the likelihood is there's other teams that have the resources and the depth to probably do that better than we can. But at the same time, we can beat anyone. We can. And we can do the same again this weekend. It's going to be bloody hard. A brilliant defence. Calafiori, that's the one I'm most looking out for. And Jurian Timber as well. We don't know a great deal about him. I think he's a really, really good player as well. But we'll see. Come on, Villa. Let's do this. Up the mighty Villa.